All right, hello, hello, hello. So we're gonna play with watercolor. It's a Wednesday night, and I thought it would be fun to start like a Wednesday watercolor thing. So so the thing about watercolor, all right, is of course it's all about water, and it's all about the paint, but it's really about the paper, okay? I'll say, don't skimp on paper, all right? So, and I'm gonna show, okay? So here I have a piece of really nice Arches watercolor paper. It's kind of expensive. I'll show you the pad. Ta-da! And I just cut this down so that I have, you know, smaller pieces to like play with. But yeah, this is it. Arches, and they have different pads and stuff. It's this one is I think it's a cold pressed. Yeah, this one's cold pressed, which is a smaller grain, right? The heat pressed has a rougher texture surface. And then we have here a just piece of regular mixed media paper. I think I might have, oh, look at this. I also have a Tim Holtz watercolor paper, which I've never played with, so we can play with that. So the first thing is, okay, so the next thing is paint. All right, so I have a couple of different paints, right? But this one is just my Winsor & Newton paints. This is just a Jane Davenport, just a small little palette. And then I also have like a cheaper, you know, one of those like cheaper kid palettes. But I thought I would just use the Winsor & Newton. Any watercolor will work, right? So I'm just going to use the red, right? So well, it's really pink. It's the Permanent Rose color, this one. But any red will work, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're just playing. Just some water, some paint, right? Get a good amount of paint on my brush. Okay, so let's look at the difference between the papers, right? So on mixed media paper, we have a brush full of paint. Let's just, and on wet on dry, right? Let's just come down the paper like this. Wet on dry. Right? Mixed media paper. Here's the Tim Holtz paper. Refill our brush. And I'm just holding the brush at an angle like this, and I'm just going back and forth down, just as an exercise, just to play with the paint, to play with the paper. My table is angled a little bit. It's not really at a 15 degrees, which doesn't matter anyway, because I tilt my work a lot of times anyway, depending on the angle of my brush. We're just going to come down like this until we run out of paint. And it just kind of dry brushes itself, right? Ta-da! That's the Tim Holtz watercolor paper. And I will grab another brush full, and this is the Arches. Ta-da! So there we go. The three different papers, and I'm going to let it sit for a minute, right, to let it do its thing. Because the thing about watercolor is when you leave it, it kind of settles, you know, and settles into the paper and into it, you know, because it's water. So let's do some wet on wet. I'm going to rinse my brush. And I'm just going to wet the paper here. Just soaks it up. Okay, this mixed media paper. All right, so it's pretty shiny, right? Just gonna drop, well, that's not a lot of paint. We'll mix a little bit more. Let's drop some paint in here. All right, let's put a dot there and a dot here. Let's see what it does. We could take a little bit more water, rinse our brush a little bit and take a little bit more water. Spread it around a little bit. Okay, and we'll let that sit and see what that does. We'll do the same thing on the Tim Holtz paper. Just some wet. Let's see what this does. I bet it spreads better. I already had to move my should we add some dots here and there, dot, dot. And come in and spread it around like we did with the other one. And then we'll leave it and we'll see what happens. Here's this one. This is the arches. Right, so this is, again, just to play with what the water is doing, what is the paint doing, right? How wet is your paper? How much paint is on your brush before we do anything, right? I know so many people get intimidated. I think the best thing is to just play a little bit. All right, we have lots of paint on our brush. Just drop some paint in. Put some dots. Yep, the arches is still my favorite, huh? Look at that. Too much water. If there's too much water, you can always dab your brush and pick some up. And if you have good paper, you have time to do it. It's not like, I don't know about this one, but all right, and we're just gonna let that sit. They're, I don't know, little jars of sprinkles. That's what they are. And then the last little thing is dry brushing, right? So I'm gonna rinse my brush, not that I need to. I over rinse my brush. I really need to not do that. It's a waste of, paint, really, truly. Okay. So I'm going to hold my brush kind of parallel to the paper and I'm going to go fast. Like that. Right? And this is the mixed media paper. So there's some dry brushing. And we'll leave that and see what that does. Here's the Tim Holtz. Right, so there's the Tim Holtz one. We'll leave that one. A little bit more paint. All right. All right, so again, parallel to the paper, kind of fast, right? And you don't want to hold your brush all the way up here. You want to hold it kind of back a little bit. Ta-da! Dry brushing. All right. So there's that one, right? So we played with some different things, right? Wet on dry, wet on wet, and some dry brushing. All right, so we're dry, right? So here's our mixed media paper. As you can tell, right, it buckles easier. It just doesn't work as well, right? The paper soaks in the water quicker. It's harder to lift paint from the paper, all those things. It's harder to mix colors. I didn't really show that yet, but that's okay. Here is the Tim Holtz. Not too bad, not too bad. This didn't come out bad, but nothing beats Arches, right? Look at that, just beautiful. So the subtleties in the, and I'll say, you know, as a beginner, have a hands up and buy some nice paper. Like really, that's a big, because it's already hard, right? Like Maddie said, to control the medium, right? To control where the water goes, where everything goes. So anyway, on to the actual project. So it's going to be easy. I just have a regular pencil. I'm just going to draw, let's see, we're going to draw a line. We're going to draw a table. And then we'll draw an apple, like just an apple and maybe a glass, right? So let's see, let's draw the glass first, because otherwise our apple will be giant and our glass will look tiny. So let's see. From up here in this corner, we'll draw a little oval like this. And then it'll just come down. It'll be like a goblet like glass. And it'll just come down like this. Nothing fancy, right? It'll come down. And then another circle comes around like this. Whatever, that's good enough. Good enough, I say. Right, so there's our glass. We have a glass. And now, I don't know if you can see it. There it is, our glass. Ta-da. And now we need an apple, right? I don't know if you can even see. Let's like zoom in. There we go. An apple. Shall we put it here? So here's the wonderful thing about apples is that they're not perfectly round, right? They're not perfectly circular, right? So they have like a little dip down here, right? They just come up like this. Okay. That's, you know, we'll draw a circle first. Ta-da! Like that, right? And we can go in and erase things. It's not a big deal. Don't particularly want it touching our glass. Whatever, it wants to touch the glass, it's going to touch the glass. Fine. You know, who am I to argue with my art, you know? Who am I to argue with my art? Okay, so down here, right, the apple has like a little, it like comes up like that, right? This is a pretty round apple. I may bring it up like this. And erase all this. Right? This is all just to play with watercolor. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's your art, right? Does not, I'm telling you, it doesn't need to be perfect. Especially watercolor. It's the impression of it, right? We want the impression of an apple. I'm going to erase some of these lines just so they're not so strong. They're very dark, right? I don't want them so super dark. Up here, right, we have a line that kind of goes like this. Ta-da! Just like that. And then the stem comes out like this. Right? And then at the top of the stem, it's kind of bigger. It's got like a bigger knobbly thing like that. Ta-da! It's an apple, right? Done. Done. An apple. Right? Do we want to add anything to the painting? No, we're going to keep it very, very simple. This is an arches page that I cut in half, right? I just cut it in half. So we have our drawing of our apple and our goblet. And it's going to be very simple. So the first thing that we're going to do is I have this big brush. Dum-dum, I bought a 24. Ooh, I feel fancy. Like a real artist or something. You can use a spray bottle, whatever, a smaller brush. But I don't tape my paintings because, especially in my altitude, they dry too fast, and they buckle. Even when I paint, when I tape them, it buckles. It cockles is the word, which is a wonderful word, isn't it? So I'm just gonna wet the back of it. I'm gonna wet the entire thing. I'm gonna wet it quite a bit. Oh, you know what? I really wanted to mention, and I forgot to from the beginning, I'm horrible about that, is Joe Cartwright on YouTube. Everything, well, a lot of things I learned from Miss Pete, but everything that I know about watercolor, pretty much, I learned from Joe Cartwright. And then practicing, obviously things that I've just learned, like the paper. I learned that the hard way. Just get good paper. You can skimp on the paint and on the brushes, I'm telling you. But get good paper. It really makes a difference. Okay, so I'm going to let that soak for a minute and we'll mix some colors, right? So I'm going to grab my bigger brush. Do I have a little bit more bigger brush? Okay, so we used the rose, right? And I'm going to use the same, and any red will work, right? Any red, but I'm going to use the rose. A little bit more water. We want quite a bit because I don't want to run out, right? Better to have more mixed than less is what I say. And then I want to darken it up, right? So we could do that in a couple ways. We could use the brown, but I don't want to use brown, right? We're only going to use the primaries. So we need to add blue, which will obviously make it purple. But then we'll have to, what we'll do, which will darken it up, right? Because we want to make it a little darker of a red. But that's way too purple, right? So what we got to do is we got to make it brown, a little bit more brown. So we got to add some yellow. So we're going to add some yellow. Ooh, that might even be, and we might have to, we'll probably add more red. Let's add more red. I'm not even in frame. Okay. More red. A little bit more water, maybe. We're starting to get very thick. More red. Okay, a little bit more blue. Just to darken it up a little bit. Right? I don't know. Maybe more red. Right? So it's pretty purple. We could add a tad bit more yellow. So you just gotta play with it, until you get the color that you want for your apple. And if you mix your own colors, you get, I don't know, I really like it. I find you get more interesting. You just get more interesting, like effects and stuff. Let's use this as a blotting paper and check our color. Oh, isn't that a beautiful color? That's perfect for our apple, don't you think? I think so. Okay. So there is our red, and I'm just going to leave this paintbrush over here because I don't want to waste the paint. And we need, oh, we're going to do a goblet, right? So we're going to do a goblet. So we need a gray. Let's use this yellow. Well, it's orange, but that's okay. We'll just say it's yellow. So we have yellow. We'll add some red, right, which has made our orange, pretty orange. Let's grab some blue. That's a nice brown, maybe a little bit darker. Let's look at the color. Let's check the color. Because it's just, we only need a little bit. This is for the stem. That looks good. Right, that's a good color for the stem. Okay, and then we need the goblet. A color for the goblet. And I'll go ahead and rinse this one out because we only need a little bit of brown. All right, so I'm going to add some water to the palette. Let's add blue. Now we want kind of just a wash for this one. So let's see, a little bit of blue and a little bit of red. Right, because I want a gray. That's what we're going to go for, is a gray. So yellow, which has given us a brown. So we need to darken that up, right? So we need blue. Look at that. Ta-da! And that has given us our gray. And you know what? We could go even a little bit more blue. Let's just make it a little bit more of a gray blue. Right? Let's look at that color. It's pretty dark. Well, which is okay. That's just the tone. We'll add water before we use it. So, how is our paper? It is pretty soaked. I mean, it's soaked through. I'm going to add another layer of water. Right, we want it to soak as much as it can because we want the core of the paper to be wet, and that will allow the front of the paper, and the front of the paper will stay dry for the most part, right? And then when we put water on it, it doesn't dry as fast. And it really does help, and it sticks to the board. So, which you'll see because of the water surface tension. Okay, I think it's good enough. It's good enough for our purposes. Okay, and now I'm going to wet the board, right? I'm just going to wet the board with a bunch of water. Right, this is going to help us. Then I'm going to fix our paper to the board like that. Ta-da! And we can wipe off the excess. And we're prepared. All right, so now we're ready. Now we're ready to paint. All right, so we have this big loaded brush that has the apple brush on it. Oh, that's right. This is going to be a gala apple. I was going to mix. We need to mix like a yellow color is what we need to do. So I'll mix it in this one. All right. Let me clean out this black. Okay. Okay, so we'll grab some, and it's not hard. Let's just grab some yellow. right? We've got some yellow and a little bit of our red. That will make a beautiful like golden color, huh? That's perfect. Maybe a little bit more yellow. Perfect. All right, so I have this brush loaded up with the golden yellow that we just mixed, and I'm going to paint in this whole apple, right? And I'm going to make sure that my brush is really loaded, really good with paint, right? And then I'm just going to paint the whole apple. And I want to try to not pick up the paint as I write. We want to leave the wet. We want to make it wet, right? Because right now we're painting wet on dry. And in a minute, we're going to paint wet on wet. Right, so I just grab more paint on my brush because it's kind of a tiny brush. Right, when you use a tiny brush, it only holds so much. So, okay, so we're wet, right? Our apple is wet. So I'm going to grab a little tiny bit of this red. I'm going to mix it in to this orange that we just had, right? And I'm going to add, I'm just going to drop, I'm going to drop some paint in here and there while it's still wet, but I'm going to do it right now. This will just give us a little bit more interest. Just dropping paint in. Okay. And you can't, you know, you only have so much time before it starts to dry, and then you start to get little cauliflowers, right? So that needs to dry now, our apple. But we can make our, we can clean up our apple actually. Let me rinse our brush real good, right? And then dry it off. I'll come in and I'll clean up these edges a little bit. Just kind of lift the paint. All right, good enough, good enough. Doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, it's watercolor, right? So, our goblet, we can paint our goblet for sure. So, this color, this gray color that we made, I'm gonna add some water to it because it's just too strong, right? That tone, it's just too strong. So I'm going to add a bunch of watercolor to it, and that, or water to it, and that should make it more of like a wash. See? Let's test it on this paper. Much better, right? Maybe even a little bit more water, right? It could even use a little bit more water. I just want it really, really washy, a washy. And we're going to come in like this. And I'm going to like leave some of it, right? We're going to do some dry brush like that. Leave some of it just white, right? Unpainted. Rinse the brush really, really good. And then soften these edges a little bit. come in and try to lift some of this. Ta-da! Oh, we need to clean up this edge. This edge is really bad. Just went in with my brush gung-ho, huh? That's okay. Ta-da! We can clean up these edges too down here. Wonderful thing about using a wash like that is that you can clean it up a little bit easier than something darker, you know. But again, we just want the impression of everything. We just want the impression of a goblet and the impression of an orange. It doesn't need to be photorealistic. All right. I put a little tiny bit of this gray on my brush and I'm just coming in on the rim. And it's not completely dry yet, right? So it's going to seep in to the wash a little bit, which is okay. A little bit here. There. Okay, good enough, right? There's our goblet. It's a little wonky here, right? It's not exactly even. It doesn't need to be. Who cares? Who cares? We're just having fun. How dry is our apple? Is it still very not dry? It's not dry. It's not dry enough. It's not dry enough. You know what? It's dry enough to pick up some of the paint, though. Let's come in and pick up some of the paint. Let's pick up some around here, right? Let's pick up some of the paint around here. I'm trying to do this without causing cauliflowers. Let's maybe come down here like this. I'm just trying to preserve some of this white. So we're going to go in with red. We're going to dry brush it in red because I think that'll look nice, right? It'll give it that gala apple look. Let's try and smooth out these where the paint has spread. All right, at this point, right, the more you mess with it, the more it's like, don't mess with it, all right? So we're just gonna leave it and let it dry, right? I'm gonna let the apple part completely dry, is what I'm gonna do. All right, so our apple is dry, but if you could tell, the core of our paper is still wet and it's still stuck down. If it's not and it's starting to come up along the edges, you can always spray it, spray the back of the paper and carefully, right? And then the board and stick it back down. All right, so our apple. We want this brush, right? So how much is this like dried? Look at that, that's perfect. We mixed the red paint, right, on this brush, and it's kind of dried now. So let's go through Oh yes, that's lovely. Yeah, and I'm just gonna lightly, and I'm not holding it up like this. I'm holding it at an angle, and I'm kind of using just the barely touching the brush to the paper, really, right? It's really red, huh? Right, let's just be brave. Let's just put it in. Put it in. Stop mucking about. Another thing about watercolors, you just got to let go and you got to be brave and you just got to put it in and then be happy with it and leave it. Right? Just leave it. Right, so I might fill in a little bit down here. And that's it. Right? We want a little bit here like this. And it's good. Right? We're going to leave it at this point. The more we mess with it, I feel like the more it's going to get messed up. Right? As I continue to mess with it. This part needs filled in. Right? Because this is going to be darker. This is the light. This is where it's going to be darker. Okay. Done. Not going to touch it. It's going to be left alone now. And then we can put in, however, our little stem. We can put on our little stem. All right, we have brown here. It's a little dried out. Some water. Might darken it up a little bit. Yeah. All right, and then I'm just going to come in and color it in, right? Done. And then I'm going to leave it. We can come in down here at the very bottom and put in just a little like that. Coming out of the bottom of the apple. Ta-da! So, and then the glass. If we want to add another layer of dimension to the glass, which, oh, I don't know, you know, at this point, when it's this, we could add a little bit. We could dry brush it, right? So we have this gray that we used, right? It's this gray. Let's blue it. I'm going to blue it up. And it's going to be thicker paint. Okay. I'm going to dot, right? Just to take out some of that paint. Try to barely touch this glass. Just kind of come up like this. Ta-da! Add a little bit here and there. It's pretty dark, huh? That blue. It's hopefully should blend in with the gray a little bit because it's not all completely dry. So there is our apple and our goblet. I think it's excellent. I love it. Our goblet's a little bit wonky, but that's okay. Now you can keep the line and use it as a reference for the table. So for example, we can just put that in real quick. I think, let's see, what do we want to do? Shall we go? Let's add yellow to this. We'll make kind of a green brown color, right? An earthy, neutral, muddy kind of color. And we'll come in, we'll put in a table, like a tablecloth, right? Just dropping color in here and there. I'll come in with the more water. We'll water it up. Right, we'll get all around the apple and everything. Ta-da! Okay, I'm gonna grab a little tiny bit of water, come in and like spread this this paint around. Some kind of all right. There's our table, and then a lot of times with something like this, right? So we have our light coming in from here. Let's see, I'll take some like orange or yellow, and I'll come in and I'll put in like a makeshift kind of light source, right? Up here in the top corner. Take some clean water. And spread out that color a little bit. Right, just to give a little bit of a, I don't know, it just adds to some, I think a drop of water dropped on our painting down here. It's okay. Just pick it up. And then over here, down in this corner, we can add like, I don't know, a semblance of like, I don't know, like a darker kind of color. Perhaps maybe continue with the green. So let's grab some blue, maybe like a darker green. Grab some blue, some yellow, right? We could take a tad of the pink and that'll darken it up, right, for us. Look at that. Perfect. Just going to drop that color in. In this corner. In the opposite corner. And then I'm going to rinse my brush and make sure it's not too wet, right? And then I want to spread, I'm just going to spread the color. It's like there's still bits of green in my brush. There we go. Let's lift that up. You want, if you, it's hard, you know, because you have to keep everything kind of evenly wet. Otherwise you get like cauliflowers and stuff. See, look, this wet paint has come into our tablecloth down here, which is not a big deal. We'll just pick it up, right? Just pick up the water, right? Because this water up here slowly moved down. Awesome. And then, oh, are we out of this color? Of course we are. I can come in and try to just add some, put it back in. I didn't wait long enough, obviously, but it's fine. All right, now we're just gonna leave it, let it dry, right? And this is gonna meld in because, you know, come in and pick up some of that water just keeps, right, moving down from up here that we were working on the, but it's good. Just lifting that paint. All right, gonna let it dry. All right, so we are dry enough to add our signature. I have this, just this brush. I suppose I can use this brush. I think it has a better tip. And we'll do it in this red, since we already have a bunch mixed. Where shall we do it? Perhaps just down here. Ta-da! And that's it. Our apple and our goblet. Just a quick little exercise. I think it's a good exercise. It helps you. I'm probably going to do a bunch more. You know, I need to work on letting loose, not going back into my work over and over again, because you really ruin it when you do that. You add it and you'll be done, right? You don't come in and can, like, down in here. So if you can tell, you know, it just doesn't, it's not great. But I think it's fine. It's fine. It's a great exercise. You do wet on dry, wet on wet, dry brushing, some washing, some washes, some trying to get around your objects for backgrounds and stuff. And, you know, I mean, a lot of people put in their backgrounds before. But anyway, there we go. A apple and a goblet, watercolored just for you. Anyway, It's not completely dry, but dry enough. Ta-da! An apple. You can do it. I believe in you. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. Why not? Anyway, I will see you all very, very soon. We'll probably work on the Junk Journal Journeys journal or whatever. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.